You're watching Adam the Bull on the BetRivers Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. If you're not using the BetRivers app, you're missing out. Coming up later, I'll give you a chance to win with BetRivers. And meanwhile, I continue to kill it with the best bets of the week, Joe. Joe, do you pick football games? Do you?
No, goodness.
No.
I don't know if we're allowed to.
Oh, yeah, you probably
But I'd be handing money away if I tried.
By the way, and Joe Vardon, of course, from The Athletic, covers the NBA, does a great job. I've known him for years after he and Jason Lloyd and Dave McMenamin were the trio of lunatics covering the Cavaliers. They did such a great – I kid, but you guys did such a great job covering that team and the run of LeBron. But you could bust Jason's balls because we have a fantasy league, at the TV show, and he did not make the playoffs. So I don't know if you want to bust his balls. There's plenty of things to bust his balls about, but you can just throw that in the mix there.
I do. And I could, he's been a failure for many years in fantasy baseball, whether I've been in the league or not. And so, I think this is just continuing a tradition.
Yeah. Are you in that AL only keeper league that he does?
I was for a while, and then of all people, I handed my team off to Fedor.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No wonder I get texts for Fedor every once in a while about like, hey, is this guy on the White Sox any good? All right. Well, let's get to the NBA. What's it like, by the way? Like, obviously, for 4 years, you were traveling with the Cavs. You were Cavs focused, and there were so many great stories. And the championship was an all-time story, and covering LeBron. And now you're doing everything. You're covering Olympics, all this international stuff. And you're all over the league. I'm not asking you necessarily which one you like more, but what's the transition? I know it's been a while, but what's the transition been like, and how are you enjoying it?
Well, it's the first thing that's crazy to think about is that I've been doing the national job for much longer than I covered the Cavs. This is year 7 for this job. But I think just to like sort of reconnect to what you're talking about and even how like why you and I know each other. What is still cool, and this is true, is that in all my travels now in the league, whether I go someplace or sometimes if I'm at a Cavs game and people, come back to our building, they talk about, they have a memory from those days. And there's something about, Jason and like, there's some memory that they have of like Jason and Dave and I doing something crazy or whatever it was. And it is cool to me that like that time, in our 3 lives, but then like as part of being what was happening in Cleveland and being involved with you and sort of just all of us and those 4 straight finals and how like as a community, we kind of all shared in that, and we were sort of the conduit for everybody to enjoy that at some level. That means a lot to me that all these years later, when I go around the league, people still talk about that. So I think it's a way to kind of stay grounded and just stay connected to what was like, some of the best 4 years any of us ever had.
It's so funny because you said it's been 7 years covering national, and my first thought was it can't be that long, right? In some ways that run seems like just yesterday. I'm like, it can't be 7 years since that ended, but
it is. It is, and it's like if you think about just the Cavs, like Tristan, of course, is still in the organization, but he had even left for a while.
Sure.
Nobody on the coaching staff, at least on the front end of the bench, is left. The front office, most of them were junior staffers at the time. They kind of graduated for the last finals run. They're still around. But yeah, it's amazing just how quickly this can all be, how quickly it goes. And LeBron being in year 7 now with the Lakers, that's just nuts. And it's also kudos to the Cavs too, because of how hard they fell, as you should when you lose a player of that caliber. To be back where they are now is like, that's a real accomplishment. Like they did it. They completed a rebuild. I don't think rebuilds end in titles. I don't think it's fair to say like when you talk about like Philly and the process, like Joel got them to the second round and they've been a perennial playoff contender. Like that process is complete. Like, has it ended in a title? No, it's not over yet either. But like, so the Cavs have made it. They made it back. They are relevant.
Yeah.
What happens from here, we'll see.
Yeah, and listen, the NBA a million times better than I do, but I did not see this team. I was convinced after last year that the Cavs were just going to be like the Sixers have been, one of these teams that they're pretty good. They get to the first or second round, and that's it. And they haven't proven anything else yet. We'll see if they could prove it come playoff time. But at the moment, at least, it feels like this team could be something more. Now, I don't know that they can get past Boston in a series, but in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined them playing as well as they have through 25 games. Was there any way at all you saw this coming?
No, I certainly didn't. I don't think The Athletic did at large, and I don't think that anybody else did. ESPN did. Like, no, the odds makers didn't see this. Like, they didn't make any changes to their personnel after last year, and what they were last year was a good team that actually made some decisions to end up where they ended up in the bracket. So they drew Boston in the second round instead of the third. So that's about what we all thought they would be. And then they come out playing like this. I don't want to speak negatively about this team. I don't want to cast this in a negative light. The thought in my head is, if they don't make the conference finals, historically, that's a pretty big failure. Yeah. Because if you look at the number of teams that have started like even 12-0, maybe it's 13. All of them but one made it to the finals, and that other team that didn't make it made it to the conference finals.
Right.
So historically speaking, the Cavs are on their way to a conference final.
Yeah, and you're right. And at this point, it will be. I mean, listen, whenever your season ends without a championship, there's always disappointment, but there's different levels, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if the Cavs lose a hard-fought 7-game series to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals this year, I don't think we'll be killing Kenny Atkinson unless you're right. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But it'll still be disappointing, even though the Celtics are the defending champs and the odds-on team to repeat. I know, especially early in the season, there were some people saying, well, maybe this is like that Hawks team a number of years ago that won all these games, and they felt like a fraud the whole season and then lost in the playoffs. Do you see any connection at all with that team?
No, I guess what you could say, well, the Cavs' schedule was somewhat light in terms of who they played, but they also won 17 games in 29 days. So I don't care who you're playing. To play that many games in that short amount of a time span and win 17 of them is nuts. So I do think they're really good. I think the difference, there's two differences. 2 or 3. The first one is inarguably the growth and difference in Evan Mobley. And there's been a lot written and said about that, about how Kenny has unlocked Evan and been able to use him in a way where they can keep two bigs on the floor for more time. They're still not necessarily closing that way, which is an interesting discussion. But the Jared Allen, Evan Mobley tandem together on the floor is not hurting this team the way it was last year. That's the first thing. The second thing, Donovan Mitchell and therefore the rest of the team, they are in a better mood. They're happier. Donovan's happier with Kenny here. And as a result, everybody else in the room is happier. That's number 2. Yeah. The third thing is, this is not a personnel change, but Ty Jerome is healthy this year, and no one saw this coming. But he's made a difference. Like, he's made a tangible difference in how they play. So I don't know if that'll last, but he's certainly in the running for most improved player right now. And I think those are the 3 main differences.
There's no doubt about it. All those things have been huge. One other thing I throw in the same vein as Donovan Mitchell being happy, and you know him better than I do. I don't know him at all, but he seems like, from the outside, to be one of, if not the most selfless superstar in the league. I know he may not be on the he's not on the Jokic and that level, the tier one superstars, if you will. But, I think for Evan Mobley and some of these other guys to emerge, on some level, Donovan had to, take a step back in a way, didn't he? And I think that's a big part of this.
Yeah. Last year when when the Cavs were without Darius and Evan for that month plus, and they went from like they're going to fire JB any minute to the hottest team in the league. Yeah. Donovan pretty much led the league in assists in that time. Like he was averaging like over 9 assists a game. So like that is in there with him. I think the thing with there's a couple issues, if you will, with Donovan. To your point, like yes, he is somewhat selfless, like as a player. He doesn't want to be like the guy who is solely counted on. And he can move the ball. So those are all good things. I think that Donovan, that people don't give him enough credit for how smart he is and how perceptive he is. And then also like, it's almost like cause he wears like trendy, sort of like face softening glasses. That people like, they say they call him a nice guy. Donovan's he's not a bad guy. Like that's not what I mean, but he's got an edge to him. Oh, sure. He does. And I think the reason why he doesn't get enough credit for that, and the reason why people look at this team and they still say, soft, nice guys. Right. It's just because he hasn't been able to finish it in the playoffs. He had that crazy bubble run against Denver that ended in 7 games, but like he hasn't gotten his teams to a conference finals yet, and that's the knock on him. Once he does that, I think people understand that he's got the makeup of a superstar. Yeah.
Evan Mobley the other day obviously had the best game of his career, scores 41, hits 6 threes. I think he had 16 field goals, double digit rebounds, 3 blocks. I think it was the first. I can't remember the first. Mikey McNuggets had a stat the other day. He and Kevin Durant, the only players maybe this early in their careers. I can't remember the exact thing, but it was like 40 points, 10 rebounds, 3 blocks, and made a certain amount of threes. And obviously, I'm not going to compare him to Kevin Durant, but I know Jason's been saying for years, hey, the only way the Cavs win a championship if Evan Mobley becomes their best player. And clearly, Donovan's still their best player, but maybe Evan's going to be a close second. I don't know, but that game was. He's played great all year, but that game, that was a whole nother level, Joe. That was wild and fun to see.
Yeah, that's. That's the kind of thing. I was at home on a Saturday working on a story that's going to run at some point, and you throw the Cavs on, and Evan scores 16 points in 12 minutes, and so now you're on alert, like that something really special is going to happen. He sets a career high for threes in the first quarter. It's funny that you said that Jason says that about Evan, which he does, and that's true. But where did he get it?
He stole it from you?
No, it's one of the most prescient things Kobe Altman ever said. He brought Donovan to town and he said, listen, this doesn't mean that our runway is shorter. He said, we won't be ready to compete until Evan Mobley is ready to compete. Evan Mobley appears ready to compete. And so here we are.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I wanted, obviously, I've seen the Celtics play a lot. We know how good they are. We know how much of a challenge they are for the Cavs. Cavs have split the 2 games, but in that last game, they were without Jaylen Brown and White, so who knows. But I don't have a good feel for the Western Conference teams, and I know at least record wise, top to bottom, the West is certainly better. But how do you think the Cavs stack up with the top teams in the West? Like Oklahoma City, another team kind of like the Cavs that has a lot of talent. I mean, they're probably a little ahead of the Cavs because obviously they were more highly thought of last year, but they got a ton to prove in the playoffs as well. So how do they stack up with those teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are 2 teams that are deeper than Cleveland, and that is Boston and Oklahoma City. I think the Thunder are incredibly deep. Their coach is dynamite, and they're the best team in the West without their one of their top players in Chet Holmgren, who busted his pelvis very early in the year. I think when you ask me how they match up, like what I get concerned about right away is the size of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort. Those dudes are big dudes, and the Cavs, like for skilled as Darius and Donovan are, they're not very big. Donovan's stronger than his height would indicate, but the Cavs' lack of size on the perimeter could be a problem against a team like Oklahoma City. So I would say depth, the Thunder have a little bit of an edge there, and then just that size on in the backcourt is a problem. Yeah,
we've seen the size be an issue against Atlanta. The only team the Cavs haven't beaten this year. Well, they haven't beaten Miami. They just lost to Miami, but
that was a scheduled loss.
Yeah, right. But they lose 2 in a row to Atlanta. Obviously, they struggled guarding the perimeter against Boston in that first loss. And you mentioned Oklahoma City, where it could be an issue as well. And the Cavs are in an interesting spot because they're slightly over that first apron in terms of cap space. You would think, well, maybe they'll try to make a trade to get a big man or a wing player who's bigger that can play defense on some of those guys. But then they're definitely going to be locked into that first apron. So what do you think they ultimately do? And is there a player to get? Obviously, they don't have much to trade.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early to know which players will be available. I mean, you think about teams that just aren't going anywhere, and the Pelicans are one of the worst teams in the league, but they have a ton of talent. They're just all hurt. But that's a team you look at. You look at Chicago. Are they going to move on from a Zach LaVine? What's going on in Minnesota? They finally have started to win some games. The Julius Randle experiment wasn't working. He's going to be a free agent, I think. So, are you willing to take a really big swing and trade Jared Allen? I'm not saying they should trade him. I'm just like, if you want that massive player back, he's probably part of the deal. I don't know that the Cavs want to do that. What's frustrating, I would say, for them is they have the big wing guy on their team, Dean Wade. And when he plays, he's pretty good, but he's been hurt so often in his career and has always had trouble in the spring staying healthy or staying engaged. And that's the hard part. If he could be more reliable come playoff time, then I think they would have their guy.
Joe, last thing. Do you think LeBron is going to play one more year? Or could this possibly – this can't be it, right?
It could be. I'm still in the camp of he's got one more year after this. I know that his plus minus is off, and that's never happened before. That is a trend things have been going that way in Los Angeles for a while. There's too many nights a week where he can't contribute defensively. And it makes it harder for the Lakers to win regular season games. But when you're able to put up 39, 10 and 10 on a given Friday, around your 40th birthday, obviously you still have something left to give. So, I think for now, I'm thinking that he comes back for one more year.
And the final thing, does Bronny over under 1 week, Bronny getting cut when LeBron retires?
Well over, because we're saying that LeBron quits after next season, which means that Bronny would have 2 years left on his deal. They're not going to cut him, because they have to pay him. So he'll be around.
He's not, is he even in the G League if he's not LeBron's son?
No.
Yeah.
No. Nope. And he wouldn't have tried that.
Right. That's true. That's a good point. Joe, what do you got? What stories you working on? What are you covering? What's going on this week for you?
Yeah, my big week is leaving very soon for Las Vegas. I'll be writing the Athletics game stories for the NBA Cup semifinals and finals. So that's almost a week out there. Yeah. It's almost like a mini. If Summer League is the big NBA convention and the finals is like that, this is sort of a smaller version of it. Looking forward to that. And then, Christmas in New York, Spurs Knicks. And then Spurs on their way to Paris in January, and I'll go with them.
Nice. That's fun.
Yeah.
When you interview, does you hurt yourself, your neck, when you have to interview Wembanyama?
Luckily, he does all of his interviews sitting down.
Oh, good.
So it's much more comfortable.
Everybody check out Joe's work in The Athletic, of course. Joe, thanks for taking the time.
That was great. Thanks for having me.
Great talking with my buddy Joe Vardon from The Athletic. Joe does such a great job, formerly covering the Cavs, now covering the Cavs and the rest of the NBA. So please check out his work at The Athletic. We got a lot more coming up. It's a big week for the podcast. On Thursday, Dustin will join me for the Bull and Fox Thursday at 2 p.m. edition of the podcast. But a special treat on Wednesday, Kevin Burkhardt, one of the top play-by-play men in the business. I knew him back in the day when he was the sideline reporter, if you will, or the dugout reporter, whatever you want to call it for baseball, for the Mets. So it'd be great to talk to Kevin Burkhardt. Thanks to all of you for joining me. Thanks to Z and Max for producing. By the way, we've got a real cool thing going on right now at BetRivers, and you have a chance to get involved. Earn a chance at $10,000 in bonus money with BetRivers prop packs. Place NBA same-game parlays to collect player card prop packs and earn rewards. You win based on how your player performs. Log into BetRivers.com or the BetRivers app to place your bets and get your pack. We'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. See you, everybody.